Hello there, people of the internet, I'm Curse Blake, and today we are going to quest with Sir Whoopass through the wonderful world of Wildwood as he tries to find the legendary villain-beating artifact to vanquish the Immortal. And ask the question, was it worth playing? Let's begin. The opening cinematic of the game really sets the tone for the rest of the journey in this game. It starts off with a fourth wall break.
Like many other games in this genre, on a dark and stormy night. This is, of course, only for dramatic effect.
And the fourth wall breaks continue through the entire game. I love this type of comedy, and I love it being in games. The initial part of the game, the tutorial, is the best part of the game that I've experienced. It has the most humor, the most fun, and probably the best tutorial I've ever played. It's the only one that I've never wanted to skip. The narrator in this game voices every single character that I've come across so far, and I think it's a really interesting way to go. I like that there is this uniform vibe to this game, that there's no crap voice acting necessarily because there's different actors, and it's just one good voice actor that they've picked to do all the voices.
They are delicious.
The narration in this game is top tier, and I think it's what makes the game for me personally. The story, the gameplay, pretty much everything else kinda sucks. The narration and humor definitely pulls this game along and makes it a joy to play. I'm always kind of getting bored in the game, and then suddenly there'll be some hilarious narration piece, or some sort of hilarious thing like the IRS man coming to take taxes from me and I can just beat him into submission. And these are the reasons why I really like this game. There is something about the way that this game is designed that it is just a meme. The game knows it's a meme and it just leans into the meme factor so well.
Now that we have reached the end of the tutorial level, the player is ready for the actual game. But here's also the mandatory deadly swinging trap section with a jumping puzzle, just as expected.
It's just, everything is just a trope. It's just a parody of everything else RPG. Even the opening cinematic where you meet the character that you are, who has no story, no background. You don't even really know your name. You just don't even know why you exist. But I instantly love the character because of how he is introduced. So straight after you actually get access to your character, I encounter one of my biggest issues that I have with the game. You get introduced to a skull, which helps you solve puzzles in the world, which I didn't really understand that this was going to be a puzzle game, but this game is kind of confused about what it is. It's a puzzle game, it's a action RPG game, hack and slash, it's a platformer, it's basically anything you want it to be, and it doesn't do any of them very well. The only thing that it does well is the humor. So after you've been introduced to Lucy, the magical skull which just has a superpower for no reason, you are able to solve puzzles for no reason. You can access levers and stuff from behind locked doors, and you kind of really use that maybe twice. You can basically just use Lucy to bring up a different style of vision to see where you need to go to unlock other things. And I think that this is a really big issue with this game for me, because there are so many things they just introduce and then they just disappear. There's nothing good about them afterwards. Lucy could have been a really interesting element in this game, and they kind of just abandoned it straight away. I really do think that this game would have been a lot better if they just fleshed out some of the ideas they had, rather than throwing every single idea they have into this game. This game is very simple. You have basically a normal attack, a block, a dodge, and you gain health by eating garden gnomes. The first enemy you encounter, you don't even have a weapon. You just punch him to death, and you kind of feel like a badass because he had a sword and you basically insta-kill him with him not even hitting you once. After you've defeated this guy, you basically get a weapon, and then you kind of feel more like the action hack and slash hero that you really should be. Sir Whoopass is great when it's not taking itself too seriously. It's great when it's telling story through stupid narration, but the combat is honestly the weakest part for me, because it is literally just hit enemy and block enemy. There's no timings, there's no nothing. When you block an enemy, you don't actually have to time it perfectly to get a good block. It's not like a perfect parry or anything like that. You just hold up your block key, and if they hit you, they fall over, basically. The same with dodge. If you roll into someone, they fall over and you can just beat them into submission. The gameplay feels really unfairly weighted in your favor. And admittedly, you are the hero of this story, but it just feels like you're way too overpowered, and there should be some enemies that kind of give you a bit more of a challenge. I can even knock over giant cyclops with the block key and them not doing much else. The different weapons have slightly different abilities. You have a light weapon, like a sword, and you have a heavy weapon, like a giant head-splitting hammer. And the ranged weapon is basically just a wand that shoots coughs or fireballs. That's right, coughs. I kind of wish the weapons were a smidge more complex. I wish that there were multiple different attacks, maybe secondary, third attacks, maybe combos, maybe something. Just something that isn't just like beat enemy in submission by clicking mouse a lot. I do like my combat systems to be slightly more complex. As you can tell, the combat is way too easy. I basically just rolled this entire room of people with little to no effort. The fact that you can eat gnomes whenever you want and it recovers health immediately means that you're not really at risk from dying from attrition damage. You normally only get killed in this game if you get hit by an insta-kill weapon, a bomb, or something stupid like that. So I feel like the gnome health potion thing just kind of doesn't really make it feel like it's dangerous. Like, the enemies in this game don't feel dangerous unless they can just insta-kill you. The things that I've encountered that insta-kill you are these weird summoner things, and the rest of them tend to be just traps that you have to avoid. The other thing that you have when it comes to complexity in combat is the famous Whoopass move that you have, where you basically just do a mini spin and kill everything instantly around you. I do like it, and I use it all the time, and it's funny just to see people get turned into mist, but I don't really think that this is something that's very useful at all. You unlock new weapons in the game by basically destroying everything that you can see. You can destroy barrels, crates, enemies, whatever, and you get lots of gems. So in around 5 hours of playing this game, I pretty much had all the weapons unlocked, so I wish that there was a little bit more to this game. I feel like with this game, there's just not enough content. Even for $35, which is what this costs, I feel like it needs just a bit more content. I've played a lot more games, like for example, Cult of the Lamb, which is the other game I've been playing right now, has so much more content for a $35 game. This being an RPG, you do get to level up your character as you kill more enemies, and you do have very little things that you can upgrade. You can either upgrade your strength, agility, luck, or protection. This is not a super complex RPG, but, you know, technically it is one. I don't think this is the strongest part of the game, but being able to make myself stronger or faster is, I guess, kind of cool, but I kind of wish that this was a bit more in-depth. I feel like this is where they could have had the feats or talents or something cool that you could do, like maybe have switchable special abilities, you know, special spin attacks or something, but I just don't think that the majority of the thought process of this game went into the actual gameplay elements. I feel like it went into writing the tutorial to be kind of awesome and writing just the jokes in the general world. The naming of all the enemies in this are fantastic. The first enemies that you encounter are orc noobs, orc sneakers, and then eventually you fight orc hipsters. They've had way too much fun naming the characters in this game and making them as stupid as possible. One of the things that I found most intriguing about this tutorial was how good it was. I didn't want to skip it. And there was so much character, humor, and just like setting to the game that made it amazing. One of the first things that I noticed with this was when you come into a room where there's a giant bookcase, and there's some books that you can read that have absolutely outrageous titles, like, for example, a review by J.J. Abrams saying that it needs more lens flares. I think that there is a lot of things in this scene that is really great, and it just sets the tone for the game super well. I found myself laughing pretty much through the entire tutorial. This scene especially really got me. This is probably the funniest game that I've played in a very long time. This game starts incredibly well. Unfortunately, it doesn't replicate this humor as well later in the game. One of the things I will say about the tutorial, and it's something that's not repeated super well in the game, is that the tutorial knows when to add new things to make the game seem interesting. And even in one point of it, it says,
"Something interesting needs to happen."
And I think that the game developers knew that they needed to make this game interesting, and especially in the opening part of the game. I feel like if they'd replicated this across the entire game, this game would be a masterpiece. But unfortunately, it isn't that way. There is no cohesion in the bad guys in this. They're generic assets that feel like have been taken from other games. You're fighting orcs, you're fighting knights with shotguns and grenade launchers, and skeletons, and just all sorts of random stuff. It doesn't have any sort of cohesive story to say why there are bad guys here. Yeah, you're in a dungeon. It's kind of like an old school D&D game where it's like, hey, there's monsters in this dungeon. Don't ask why they're there, but they're there and you have to fight them and get out. That's kind of the vibe that I got from this game, is that it's like, hey, don't ask too many questions about why things are here, but just accept that they're here and murder them in the most brutal way possible. And the game doesn't even take itself that seriously to actually, like, even trying to explain why things are here. The first kind of trap section that you go through, it even says,
These traps don't make any sense. Who even designs living areas like this? Oh well.
and I like that they just didn't even really care about explaining why there's a dungeon. And as I said, I love it that it's kind of like that stupid D&D vibe where it's like, hey, you have to, like, just deal with it. And this game is definitely unapologetic in how it doesn't give a shit about how things need to be explained. This game is inexplicable. It's a parody of pretty much every RPG trope there is, and that's why I like this game. So as you go through the tutorial, you basically start to encounter some of the traps, or like platforming sections, but you don't get introduced to puzzles whatsoever until later on in the game, and I think that's the weirdest part of the tutorial. It feels like they added the puzzles post making the tutorial. Once you're through the final section of the tutorial, you get blown up, and the game says it's the end. So after you finish the tutorial, you start what I would consider to be the real game, and that's where this game tends to fall down. And after the awesome tutorial, I was really hyped to play this game, and I thought that the next section was going to be fantastic. So as soon as you get out of the dungeon, you have to do what I would consider is a pretty subpar MMO style quest. You need to collect a certain amount of eggs from chickens and some herbs. We shouldn't have these kind of collect quests in single-player RPGs. In MMOs, it makes sense somewhat, but they are super boring even in those games. Single-player RPGs shouldn't have these, ever. Collect quests are just boring. They're only in MMOs to pad out the game before you get to the end game, really. And this game's open-world sections just felt like padding. The first questline takes you through a sewer section where you fight a boss, and it's a completely unique dungeon. And I think if the whole game was like that, where there were unique quests over and over, then that would be kind of okay, but this game has about 3 quest lines. So after you've completed this sewer section, you then get access to basically the open world and the main quest line of the game.
It is rumored the legendary villain-beating artifact is split into 3 separate pieces, each hidden in plain sight.
Which is basically to do 3 dungeons to find the villain-beating artifact, and then another 14 dungeons to get rid of a force field that's around the Immortal's lair. This is a huge padding quest that took me probably 3 or 4 hours to actually finish, and it was boring. Like, there's no story, there's no nothing. You just run through these dungeons, and some of them are really long, like half an hour, and some of them are like 5 minutes. They literally took me 5 minutes to do a dungeon, and I know I'm complaining a bit about these sections, but they're completely varied. Some of them have bosses in them, some of them have puzzles, and some of them have a combination of both, and some of them are just basically run through and destroy everything you can. I really think the open world section is where this game falls down heavily, and I feel like if they just made it more like the first quest you get in the open world and you go to different areas, similar to like how Postal works, you have an open world but you do quests in specific areas, then this would have been a much better game. But the fact that the open world section is just so long, so boring, and just devoid of all the character that the tutorial was, the sewer level even was, and even the end game is. So to be able to do these, you gain access to some other items. You get a jetpack, which is really fun because you can burn people with it, which I think is an awesome feature, and I think that's great. And you get access to a hovercraft, which is probably the most fun thing about the open world. You can just run everyone down that you want and they just turn into pink mist. I think this is an amazing feature because I think that they probably guessed that no one's going to walk around the open world. They really needed some sort of fast travel system that isn't just teleport back to the town. So the hovercraft fits that perfectly, and I think it's actually a really good piece of the open world. So for each one of the pieces of the villain beating artifact, you have to defeat a boss. Some of these are really well thought out and have some sort of pattern that you need to attack, destroy things in their mouths, or have special attacks that need to kill certain things. Then there's the other 2, which just kind of are just generic bosses. I feel like the open world sections just were rushed. There was a lot of stuff here that they just missed the mark on, and I'm really sad that they did, because this game could have been absolutely fantastic if they nailed this section slightly better. I really wish that these quests didn't feel like boring MMO quests, because this is what they do feel like. As you quest through the open world sections and some of the dungeons, you gain access to new bits of gear. You gain access to hats, The hats kind of make your character a little bit more unique. You can get cowboy hats, which make your ranged weapon shoot 3 times. You get like rabbit ears that make you run fast. And there's a multitude of other things, but I didn't really care that much about it. I just used the rabbit ears to go fast and the cowboy hat to shoot heaps of projectiles. This is one of the biggest issues I have with the combat now in the open world sections, now that my character is leveled and I had all the good gear. The ranged weapon is way too OP. You can basically just blast stuff into like smithereens easily, simply, and just with no real risk to yourself. I found myself just running through most of the dungeons just with the ranged weapon out, just blasting away, completely annihilating everything in my path, and it just made them way too easy. I feel like they needed to tone back the amount of damage the ranged weapon did, and then there might have been some reason to use the other weapons. I only found myself using the heavy weapon to break rocks, and that's it. There was nothing else good about it, except that one of the weapons was called Holy Shit, and that would be a reason for me to use it. But apart from that, I didn't use the heavy weapons. I only used the ranged weapon and the sword. This game is stupid, and it knows that it's stupid, and it kind of knows that it's half finished as well. There are a lot of buildings in this game that I've flown into, and you kind of just arrive in the building, but there's nothing in there. So obviously some of the assets are not fully fleshed out, and you actually sometimes even get achievements for going into things that you shouldn't be going into. But because they give you a jetpack, you have the opportunity to go everywhere. For example, you get an achievement for going into the city by just jumping over the wall instead of going through the gate. And if you jump over the wall, there's just a big empty area. There's nothing there. So I'm going to go through some spoilers in this section. So if you want to skip ahead, I will put a chapter here and you can skip ahead to my conclusion to the game. So after you finish the open world section of the game by completing the god-awful amount of really boring dungeons, you then gain the final quest in the game, which is basically kill the Immortal. You decide to storm his castle and find the villain-beating artifact. And you do this. And it's very simple and easy. And it's kind of very anticlimactic how quickly you can get this item. However, you never get to use the villain-beating artifact, because as soon as you obtain the villain-beating artifact, the Immortal flees the game, and the game says to be continued.
It's not like the legendary villain-beating artifact is endangered or something. The Immortal chuckled. You fool! You were supposed to keep that hideout protected. This is as bad as it could possibly get. I'm leaving. I've had enough of this.
The Immortal shouted. But what about him? We can't end the story like this. Sullivan replied.
So unfortunately, Epidemic Sounds, who obviously provided the so-called royalty-free music for this section, claimed my video. So I'm going to cut out all the audio for this section because I can't find any other way of fixing it, and I'll just talk my way through it. Can it? I'm sure the developers will figure something out later on, the Immortal said. But what about the protagonist then? Our hero? What heroic deeds would he go on and perform with his recently acquired legendary weapon? This caught me off guard way too hard and it trolled me. I was like, what? No, this can't be the end of the game. But it is. And I'm hoping that this means there is going to be a Sir Whoopass 2. And there's going to be a lot more content to that one. Because I would love to see a game with more content and the same character that this game had. That would be the ultimate goal of this. This kind of feels like a demo for what Sir Whoopass 2 should be. I hope they flesh out all the sections that they missed in this game. So, was this game worth playing? As much as I found a huge amount of issues with this game, the early game being the best fun, the open world sections of the game being completely pointless being open world, I still had a lot of fun playing this game. Blasting my way through flamboyant orcs, eating garden gnomes was just a lot of fun. I think that's the key thing I haven't really talked about as much in this game is how much fun it is. Like I've said, technically it sucks, but it is really fun. It is really fun to just go through and absolutely blast people out of the way, to fight the IRS man when you've made too much money, to have a jetpack that you can just fly around in, to have a hovercraft you can just run over like giant goats in. There's so many things about this game that are just stupid fun. The absolute wonderful narration and silliness that comes from the narrator voicing all the actors, and the kind of bizarre plot and just writing of this game is just a joy. Every time the narrator is talking, I'm having a blast. It's so much fun to hear him making little comments about me kicking the crap out of orcs.
Ouch! I'm pretty sure he's not going to be in the sequel.
Or just whatever else is going on in the world at the time. The narration and humor is definitely the best part of the game for me. The hack and slash elements are fun, but they do become boring after a time. So the only reason why I think I finished this game was because of how much fun I had listening to the narrator talking about the story. I had so much fun in Sir Whoopass Immortal Death. And I think that a lot of people like me who have the sense of humor that I do would have a lot of fun playing this as well. So I really do think that this game is worth playing. It may not be worth finishing, but it's definitely worth playing. Thank you so much for watching the review. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a big thumbs up. I had a lot of fun playing this game. And if you want to check out more of my content, I stream every Saturday about 8 o'clock Australian time. So if you want to check that out, remember to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified when I go live. And if you want to see more of me or talk to me, I have a Discord and I'll put the link in the description down below. And I talk a lot about the content that I do there, so I hope I can see you there. Anyways, I will catch you in the next video. Thanks for being awesome, and goodbye. Oh no, do we have to fight a god now?
I really want to help, but I'm afraid I can't since I'm stuck in this
Yes, let's
pose.
go!
Local skeletons to the east has a fine
Sorry, that's
selection
epic.
of elbow grease.
I'm not gonna lie, they win. They've won me over 100%.